Hello, 2322. This is my lecture on The Wife of Bass prologue and tale. A couple general points I wanted to make before I get to my notes. Critics over the years have debated whether Chaucer was an early feminist or a misogynist, someone who hated women. Again, the Canterbury Tales were written around 1400. No one else other than the Bible had ever given women a voice. Women didn't speak. Women weren't seen as smart or strong. So 1400, his main character, perhaps the most famous character in the Canterbury Tales, is a smart, strong woman. But certainly life in 1400 had a lot of misogyny. Women weren't allowed to have property. There was rape. Like it said, like coming up in her tale. So life was pretty ugly for 1400. And he was certainly a man in that society, but he did give a voice to women. So I think that's the first big thing to consider. Another thing to consider is ultimately her tale is a autobiography, but it's a confessional. She is telling stories about her real life. She's confessing. The church at that time that Chaucer didn't like would have defined her as a wicked woman, had sex before marriage, had 5 husbands, was kind of bawdy. The church would give her a thumbs down. But I think a reader in 2020 likes her, thinks she's smart and strong and uses good common sense. We like her. We see her as an early example of a strong woman. The third thing to consider, there's been thousands of books and articles written about the wife of Bath and her tale, but I would estimate that 75-80% of them, the critics talk about her appearance. She's chubby. She has a gap between her teeth. She's kind of bawdy. So critics over the years have talked about her appearance, what she was wearing, and her divorces. And if you remember, her actual tale talks about a saintly knight from King Arthur's court raping a woman. And then at the end of the tale, he has a beautiful, faithful wife, and he's not really punished for that rape. So you would think over the last 600 years, people writing about this story would focus more on the rape, but maybe you say a lot of those critics were men and they focus more on what she looks like and what she says and her divorces over than the rape and the story. So I imagine if you were a young feminist, you would like this tale better than the Miller's Tale, or be more interested. The Miller's Tale is kind of funny, and there's a fart joke. So again, if you're serious about your feminism, I think you might want to write about this. As I go over my notes, the prologue is much longer than the actual tale. So maybe it's debatable. Chaucer thinks we're more interested in her demeanor, how she looks, than the tale. She's an authority on marriage. She's been married 5 times. My note says sarcastically that you can't be a virgin without having sex. But she's been married 5 times. I ask about the Texas reaction to that. I've lived in Virginia, Ohio, Iowa, and Texas, and I got the feeling, might be wrong, there's a bigger stigma in Texas in the South than there would be in Ohio about a woman being married 5 times. If you were in a club tonight or after the COVID scare is over and you meet a woman who's been married 5 times, would you still fall in love with her and marry her? I think that's debatable. Yeah, I mean, another way to look at it is you meet a tall, dark stranger and they're beautiful, but they have a child out of marriage or they've been married before. Do you 18-year-old, 19-year-old Texans, do you marry your dream mate if they have a child before? does it matter pedestal, I'm in love with being in love? Does it matter if your dream spouse married before has a baby? It talks in my notes, it says she dominated and controlled all 5 of her husbands. The first 3 were older and rich, and she dominated them. So she flat out tells the other pilgrims she married for money. Texas, what do you think about marrying for money? Marrying an old rich guy for his wallet more than you being in love. So that could be a theme, that could be a paper. Her 4th husband was kind of wild, and she met her 5th husband that she loved while she was still married to her 4th husband. Her 5th husband is named Jankin. He was 20 and she was 40. He beat her, but he flattered her in bed. She loved him more than he loved her. So my note says he treats her the way she treated her former husbands. So he has control. I make a note about common sense. I said that before. The wife of Bath is a normal person you might meet in the pub and have a beer with. She's strong and she's smart. She gives pretty good advice, I think. And maybe that's why a 2020 reader likes her. At one point, the partner, being a typical man, interrupts her. I'm the man, I want the free dinner. I'll interrupt this woman who started a good tale. But she rolls with the flow, she rolls with the punches, holds her own with a male who interrupted her. I mentioned is Chaucer a feminist or a misogynist? And I mentioned the confessional part again. And don't forget, 1400, it's a patriarchal society. The men are in charge. The men get to do what they want. In terms of the actual tale, quick and dirty, there's a knight on King Arthur's court. King Arthur is famous, reputable, knights in shining armor, but he sees like a beautiful maiden by a river, and he immediately goes and rapes her. So he should obviously be a villain for that. Arthur's queen, Guinevere, sends him on a quest to find out what women want the most. And he travels the land asking women what they want. He meets an old, ugly woman who says she will tell him the answer if he marries her. He marries her, gives her control. She says that's what women want. More than anything, more than beauty, more than money, women want to be in control in a relationship. They want to decide. At the end of the tale, again, he married her. She's ugly and faithful. But at the end of the tale, it turns out she's beautiful. So the knight is rewarded at the end by having a beautiful, faithful wife. He raped a woman, a maiden, at the beginning of the story. But he isn't punished. Being a knight, being the man, he gets rewarded at the end. And some of my other notes are character analysis, which I may have already said before. You could maybe argue that the old woman that the knight married is the heroine, but I think maybe you ought to consider King Arthur's queen, Guinevere, as the heroine of the story. She's wise. She sends the knight on a quest, and maybe he kind of sort of learns his lesson. But Guinevere is wise and fair, and she might be the most powerful of all. Okay, so I think if you see yourself as a feminist, I think you might want to consider writing about the wife of Bath, the wife of Bath's tale. Okay.